Meanwhile, the EU executive has launched a legal case against the UK for failing to name a new representative at the European Commission. Well, let's see how that and more are playing out in London today. Juliana will tell us more. Good afternoon, Juliana. Well, taxpayers could face paying for large fine after Downing Street fails to put forward nominee for the new European Commission. Is this something of concern to the UK authorities as EU executive launches a legal case against them?
Yes and no. I suppose for those who are hardline Brexiteers, they're using this story to say, look, look at how bureaucratic the EU are, very stiff individuals. And for those who are Remainers, they're saying that this is just another example of Boris Johnson and the Conservatives trying to destroy the future relationship with the EU. So what's happened is that Britain have failed to put forward a European Commissioner name because we are in the middle of an election, and Europe are not happy with that. They said they will start legal proceedings, and they have given Britain until Friday to answer the case. Boris Johnson has said officially through his Brexit secretary that because we are going to be voting and that the Labour Party could potentially get into government, he doesn't see that it's right and fit to nominate somebody when we're not sure who will be running the country. The EU are particularly suspicious because they know that Boris Johnson is desperate to get out of Britain, and they have actually said that if you look at EU case law, a domestic law policy for a member state shouldn't trump that of EU law. So there will be some backwards and throwings, but Britain have been given officially until Friday, and of course if they don't respond, then that could be a hefty fine for Britain, just as it's trying to stop paying money to the European Union.
All right. Is London also following the report released by the International Institute of Finance that was on Thursday, showing that global debt surged by about $7.5 trillion in the first 6 months?
London are not really following this story. I suppose global debt in the city is something everybody tries to push under the carpet, but then it could also be because this $250 trillion that is being owed to the global fund over the past 6 months is mainly made up of the two largest economies, which is US and China. They've got 60% of this debt. Interest rates are really low at the moment, and it seems as if central bank governors, particularly Jerome Powell and the Fed Reserve, are pretty comfortable with this. They don't seem to be bemoaning. It seems to be the economists that are saying that, look, considering we are seeing record levels of debt, this could lead to a bust. And we have seen that manufacturing and certain areas of PMI across the world is failing. So London haven't picked it up. Also as well, what seems to be quite interesting out of this data is about emerging markets. So those markets in Africa and Asia, their debt has risen by 60% also. So it seems to be particularly concerned. But when it comes to global debt, the US, China, and some of the other G7 economies like to put that right under the carpet.
Mm-hmm. All right, bring us up to speed with today's market numbers and, of course, outlook for next week.
Well, I was saying to Bosun this morning, Chimmy, it's pretty thin here in the UK when it comes to corporate data. That one of the big stories at the moment is Labour, the opposition party. They have said that they want to offer broadband free to all households and businesses across the UK. And they say by way of doing that, they will renationalise British Telecom, BT, which was privatised by Margaret Thatcher in the 80s. And that has really kicked off a storm, particularly on social media. And it has sent BT shares down about 2.5%. But let's have a look at those numbers at intraday. The FTSE All Share is down 0.29%. The FTSE 100 is down 0.35%. And the FTSE 250 is down 0.05%. In currencies, the British pound is down on the US dollar by 0.06%, down on the euro by 0.12%, and slightly up on the Japanese yen by 0.19%.
All right, Juliana, let's call it a day and say thank God it's Friday. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thank you.
In Asian markets were mostly high on Friday as investors digested recent developments on U.S.-China trade. The Nikkei 225 in Japan rose 0.7%. South Korea's Kospi closed 1.07%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng closed largely flat. The ASX 200 in Australia gained 0.87%. Mainland Chinese stocks, on the other hand, declined on the day. Shanghai Composite was 0.64% lower. The Shenzhen Composite fell 1.134%. And U.S. stock index futures were high on Friday morning at around 4:10 a.m. Eastern Time. Dow futures rose 70 points, indicating a positive open of more than 72 points. Futures on the S&P and Nasdaq were also higher. Investors are waiting for various data releases. There will be retail sales, import prices, and the Empire State manufacturing numbers at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. There will also be industrial production numbers released at 9:15 a.m. Eastern Time. All right, I'm back here on the African continent. Sudan wants to develop its stock market, which has avoided a crash during months of unrest, but has a long way to become attractive to foreigners. Though still tiny, with a market capitalization of around £8 billion at the end of 2018, its trade volumes have risen steadily in local currency terms in recent years. They increased to some £11 billion this year from £9 billion for all of 2018.
In the small basement of a two-story building next to Khartoum Central Bus Station, around 40 smartly dressed men and women gather around terminals for an hour a day to help map out the future of Sudan's fledgling financial market. The stock exchange they work at managed to avoid a crash during the unrest that convulsed the country this year, toppling longtime ruler Omar al-Bashir. And now he has ambitions to expand once the government has stabilized an economy in crisis and ended the country's isolation.
With the changes that happen in Sudan, we expect there will be big interest from non-Sudanese investors. Now, the trade volume in the market in 2019, despite it has not yet ended, is estimated at £11 billion from £9 billion last year. There are still 2 months until the end of the year. It may very much exceed that number.
The board has also upgraded technology with Oman's help and hopes to connect all brokers online soon. Currently, only one brokerage can trade real-time online. Most trade is in a type of sukuk or Islamic bond known as shahamas.
We need to have new products that support the state's strategic goals. We need to have a strong stock movement. Our stock movement compared to countries abroad, we're not on the same level. We're still in a recession when it comes to stocks. So as I told you, we need new products that support the country. We need new strategies to manage stocks. We need the current government to better support financial markets, Khartoum Exchange and companies. In order to develop, we need the government to look at that side.
Some foreigners, notably from the Gulf, have bought into the market, but many have struggled to repatriate their investments since the 2011 secession of South Sudan, which took away most of Sudan's oil wealth and caused hard currency shortages.
After the break, Zimbabwe plans to cut value-added tax. Details in a moment. To stay with us.